Welcome, everybody. I'm Mike Truska, committee chair and your host of our virtual panel series, which we're keeping the streak alive. I'm quite excited about that. We are in May. I have to check the calendar because I never know where I am the way things have been going. And it's been a busy month, 2024. And we have a guest who I'm very excited to introduce. We will in a moment. But just a couple of housekeeping notes. Something you've seen that we're starting to do, which I'm very excited about, and I encourage all our members to do, is we've actually started scanning in newsletters, old newsletters. So if you have an old newsletter, this is my plea. By all means, feel free. If you want to scan it yourself, I have the ability to do an OCR reader, optical character recognition, to convert it to text. If you just want to mail it to me, that's fine too. If you just want to send me a scan, that works just as good. I'm happy to take any of those newsletters and scan them in. We've done that. We have a newsletter and a letter, pretty pointed letter, from one of the founders, Paul Cardwell, to Gamma, when Gamma asked for, I think, a $50 fee for the CAR-PGA to participate. And his note is actually really illustrative of where the CAR-PGA was at that point in time. This is all 90s or 80s. It goes back quite a bit. So we're just going to scan these things in and put them in date order on the existing website, which means now if you go farther enough back, I think in the 90s, you'll find those newsletters. So they have a permanent digital archive. But I would encourage anybody who has any of those newsletters to consider doing that, because I think as a community, we can get together and sort of preserve some of that stuff. It is a shame that we haven't had that to date. I think we've always talked about it, and it's a huge opportunity to sort of just show how long the CAR-PGA has been around. And it really is its own snapshot on what was happening in the industry. So we started doing that. A big thank you to our members who submitted that content, and we're going to keep doing it as long as there's folks who are interested and willing to submit and share. So definitely go through your old files if you have them and let us know. And with that, I will add a pin to my friend Dave Hartless, who I have to stop calling David because we have a David Millions, and we got very confusing because that's two board members with the name Dave. Hello, Dave. Welcome.
You can also just call me Heartless because that's what everybody's called me
I
since middle
have
school.
difficulty calling you Heartless. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I know you want to do that, and maybe like in a different context, but just calling you Heartless does not come naturally to me. So forgive me. I'm gonna call you Dave. Or Dave H. But welcome, Dave. So obviously, one of the nice things is that this is a great interview because we know each other now, and you are a board member as well. So we had this on the books almost at the same time as you were considering going for board. So it's great because this is an opportunity for folks to get to know you better anyway. Which I think actually, the more I think about it, we probably should just interview all the board members at some point. So this is a great opportunity. But you are not unfamiliar with the role playing and Dungeons and Dragons and online spaces. So I'm super excited to get into that. Are you ready? You ready? I'm ready.
Yep. Let's do it.
So we always start, if you've seen any of these that we do, we start with the softball, but it's good because I do think it's illustrative of sort of where you are and where you came from into the gaming. So take us through your sort of gaming journey and what your formative experiences were, and then we'll start getting into your career next. But how'd you start playing?
So I started 1984 with the Red Box. I was on the bus after school, and there were a couple of guys that were not super close to where I live, but like we were on the same bus route, so kind of close, and they had a bunch of AD&D modules that like they had already played through, they weren't using anymore. And I kind of saw like what they were reading. I was like, hey, can I read one of those kind of thing? And then they just gave me all of them, because they were like, look, we've already played these, like we're not going to hang on to them. And those just fascinated me. And like one of the primary ones that I latched onto was like one of the popular ones, Lost Caverns of I'm not going to pronounce this
Sarge
correctly,
Canth.
but
I never know how to say it.
yes,
Yeah. Yes.
yes,
TSA. Obviously
yes,
TSO.
Yes. And just like that just sucked me in, you know. And I played off and on for a lot of years. Like into the late 80s, like mid 90s, had a kiddo, kind of like had to step away for a while, just typical life stuff kind of thing. Kind of came back into it with 3.5. Um, and then wound up at a company where we had a lot of people playing, and that led me into other systems other than just D&D. So, you know, oh geez, like World of Darkness, Savage Worlds, Call of Cthulhu. Like we were playing everything. Pathfinder, which 3.5 derivative. Like we were just playing all of it. You know, and and those were good times. Like that's those those were good times. Like I really appreciated, the ability to like um branch out into other systems other than just D&D. Like D&D is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Like we all know that. We all understand that. But there's a lot of other great systems out there too. And I would suggest people, to explore those other systems too, because there's a lot of great things baked into some of those systems where it's outside of the typical D20 kind of system that are really really fun. Um, I think one of the most fun experiences I had was a super super lightweight game called Cosmic Patrol. Like it's a very very small book, and one of the great um, items that they have in that system is the storyteller rotates every chapter like around the table, and all the other players have basically I think they call them in that system plot points. So if the DM's like, hey, you walk up to this huge set of doors and you open the doors and this massive robot comes out and he's got lasers and stuff like that. And then one of the players throws a plot point and he was like, yeah, and the robot trips on his own feet and crashes and busts his head open, kind of thing. And it's like that mechanism was amazing to me because it intertwined the players into the story, and it wasn't just the DM or the module like kind of pushing everybody forward.
Right.
So there's a lot of systems out there that do really really great things in that regard. um so for our audience here, since we're focused on role playing games, um make sure you try those. Make sure you experience those, because there's a lot of great experiences out there.
It's funny because certainly my formative time, around the same time, um, we just played everything.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
partially because there wasn't the a lot of these games were coming up, so we didn't
Yeah.
know any better. It
Right.
almost feels like nowadays people are actually more insular with their games.
Hmm.
Partially because I think D&D is so dominant when it's hard to think about this. It was dominant, but not in the same way, where it's like a brand, right? So it was sort of like there
Right.
was D&D
Right.
and you would get at the local toy store, which they used to sell.
Yeah.
But to your point, like I played Star Trek Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I literally played any game any of my players wanted to play. Champions. I mean, just all those game systems.
Yep.
Probably didn't stick with any of them, frankly.
Yeah.
Just rotated through, tried them out. But was really educational because you were just like, I don't know, like it's all just role playing, right? It wasn't like
Right.
I played D&D.
Right.
And I think again, almost to a person, everybody's experience is D&D first,
Hmm. Hmm.
that we've interviewed. However, the new generation coming up is fascinating because they don't come from traditional sort of geeky backgrounds. And they tend to have a very different perspective. So I've interviewed a few folks who come from creative, sort of
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
speculative fiction,
Yep. Yep.
other sort of non-gaming. And when they come in, boy, is it a different perspective. So it's
Right.
fascinating because, of course, D&D brings with it some wargaming roots. It brings with it some tactical pieces to it that I think
Yep.
we don't even realize are there until you start playing. Like you said, you start playing. Well, wait, the player can change the game. What a
Right.
concept! Like, it's not
Right.
just a DM who tells you what happens.
Yep.
So really fascinating stuff. And I agree to your point. Like, to the extent that we can not define gaming as Dungeons and Dragons, but as role playing, which is an enormous spectrum,
Yep.
actually.
Yep.
I think the better everybody will be, and I think that certainly is more true than ever. Pathfinder being one example of sort of taking pieces of it, but um, there's so many role playing games now. I always say, like, if you know where to look, you don't have to spend a dime. You could play role playing games till you die
Oh yeah.
without because there's
Yeah.
so many people making them for free, sharing
Yep.
their free stuff, quick
Yep.
starters.
Yep.
There's just more than a human could consume and play
Yep. Yep.
now out there. So yes, so well, that's again, I think I'm not super shocked by sort of your experience. I think that's great, and obviously that turned into something of a passion, right? So how do you take us through? You're playing D&D, or you're playing role playing games in general. How do you go from that to a job where you're sort of, and was that part of it? I mean, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it just sort of, overlapped. I almost worked for White Wolf
Oh yeah.
for their
Yeah.
web company,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
And it was so funny because, like, they didn't need gamers to work on the web. It
Right.
just happened to
Right.
be, I didn't get the job, sadly. But it was such a fascinating sort of, like, we don't need, so I don't assume that that's the case, but tell us how you got into the sort of that career. Cause I think it's very fascinating for a lot of people who love to hear about how you get into that kind of field.
Yeah. So, uh, let's see, how do I start this best? So, I am based in Huntsville, Alabama, which a lot of people don't realize is one of the top 5 tech centers in the U.S. Because of Redstone Arsenal, Marshall Space Flight Center, which is part of NASA. Um, so there's actually a very large, like, tech contingent, engineering centric, um, base here in Huntsville. It is not your typical Alabama city. Um, Fun fact: there are more PhDs per capita in Huntsville than anywhere in the U.S. There are more
Wow.
millionaires per capita in Huntsville than anywhere in the U.S. Granted, that's per capita, but that tells you, like, how, like, concentrated. Like, there's just a bunch of nerds in the city. Like, I'm just gonna say it that way. So, um, so I was doing some DoD kind of work, and it wasn't, like, really very fulfilling. And So I started looking around here in Huntsville, and there was an engineering office here for Curse. If people know what that was, it was a company that originally started to. Um, they had, like, an add-on management ecosystem for World of Warcraft players. Because, like, when you would do your guild raids, you may have 30, 40, 50 add-ons that everybody in that raid needs to run, and they all have to be synchronized. They all have to be at the same version. And it was just, it was a nightmare to try to manage that, like, over Skype, which I think is what we had at that point.
Yeah.
So, so that's kind of how Curse started. And and it was one of the few places here in Huntsville that was doing, like high skill web application development with, like, like a large number of concurrents, and that was the kind of engineering I wanted to get into. So I came in as a manager, helping that team. So the whole add-on ecosystem. So curse.com, CurseForge, the add-on client, all that kind of stuff. And that was in 2012. And we continued to grow, and Curse had a bunch of other properties too, like dadgum, minecraftforum.net, minecraftwiki.net. What were some of the others that we acquired? Foothead, Mutthead, Gamepedia, which is a media wiki platform that we started, which branched off of what used to be Wikia, and then became
That's right.
Fandom.
Hmm.
and that will become important here in a minute.
In a minute.
Um,
Yep.
so so about 2016, Twitch got interested in some of the tech that we were building into the add-on client, basically like voice comms and stuff like that. So they got interested. They bought us. We basically had to split the company. Half the team moved out to Irvine, California. The other half stayed here in Huntsville. Um, they bought the tech that was part of the team that I ran, but I wasn't going to move to Irvine. I had kids here in school, like I had a senior in high school. I wasn't going to make her move her last year. Like I'm just not going to do that. So I stayed here, um, started working on some other projects, but right about at that same time, we had a new product manager come in, Adam Bradford. If a lot of people may know who he is. Um, he came in and started selling the idea for building what would eventually become D&D Beyond. And uh, he started putting together an in-office D&D game on Thursday nights because we had several conference rooms in the office. So we would just stay Thursday nights and play, And he pulled in a back-end engineer, me, a front end engineer, a designer. Like you can kind of see what he's doing here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so we kind of built a team and built that momentum. And Curse at that time, even though we were part of Twitch, with the office here in Huntsville was rebranded as like Curse Media, so we were kind of like a subsidiary. Um, we had a program called Ignite where if you came up with a business idea, you could present that to leadership, and if you passed some initial like thresholds, you could like work on that on Fridays, you know, and then you would like say, hey, these are our milestones. This is what we want to do. This is how we want to grow. And so we kept doing that, and we built some proof of concepts, some prototypes, and this was 2016 at this point. And we had no idea at all that we were going to be a licensed partner to Wizards of the Coast. Like no expectation for that. Um, in fact, our original working name for the site was tabletop-hero.com.
Ah,
And it was basically just going to be like a better searchable database site on top of the SRD. Like that's what it was going to be. Like there was no character sheet. There was none of that, And um, as we started to progress through 2016, we actually made contact with the D&D team up at Wizards because at the same time, uh, we were also running MTG Salvation, which was like a community site for Magic the Gathering, which is Wizards' big product. Um, and that allowed us to like make contact with the D&D team. So we went up there, we talked to them, and this was just a couple of years after fifth edition launched, and they decided not to do anything digital for fifth edition. So they were like, hey, this is great, we like what you're doing, like, yeah, let's just make you a licensed partner and y'all build something. So when that conversation happened, that's when we decided on the actual D&D Beyond name and URL as a licensed partner for Wizards of the Coast. Um, so that was, I think that happened December of 2016 or January of 2017, somewhere in those couple of months. And then we announced beta in March of 2017 at PAX South, which was still a thing back then, sadly, not now. But
mm.
um, and then and then we launched August 15th of 2017. Um, I will never forget that day because me and the team were up for 48 hours going
Ooh.
into that launch. it was brutal and it was fun. So and from that point on, like I I I don't know if I can actually say specific numbers. Um, I may can, but
We're not going to make you.
like
It's okay. You don't have to.
yeah, so the team right, at that point going to launch was still pretty small. Like there was only like 4 or 5 of us,
Right.
and we had like our own little cube area, and we had a whiteboard up on the wall, and we all did like how much do we think we're going to make in the first 24 hours, like when we
Uh-huh.
launch,
Uh-huh.
kind of thing, and like all of our estimates were way too low. Like the our actual goal for what we wanted to make from August 15th to the end of our fiscal year, which was December 31st, we did that in the first 24 hours. And that's
Wow.
when we realized, oh, this may be bigger than what we thought. And, so that really just like accelerated us into growth. And it was, some of it was luck because like fifth edition was really starting to take off at that point. Like it was much better received by the community than fourth edition was. Right, wrong, or indifferent. But it was. And then, we had things like Critical Role taking off, and we signed um, like a marketing deal with them where they were promoting us, and we saw like a lot of positive benefit out of that. And that just brought in like a whole nother segment of users into D&D. Um, and we were we were more than doubling for the first few years, and then even after that, we were doubling year over year over year. I will say, I think I can say this: when we eventually wound up at Wizards, my last year there, 2023, D&D Beyond with its digital sales sold more than the physical books.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Sold
and
more volume or total like
total
revenue?
total revenue, total
Total
revenue.
revenue. Wow.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
And that was
which
that was cheaper, right? So theoretically too, that means there was more volume,
right,
right? Yeah.
right.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's, like so the overall transition there for the team was Curse to Twitch, not because of D&D Beyond. Um in right about the time that acquisition happened is when we started D&D Beyond. In Twitch then in 2019 sold us to Fandom, which used to be a Wikia, but they sold us because of Gamepedia, which was a bunch of game centric wikis that had forked from Wikia.
Mhm.
So basically, Fandom just wanted that traffic back, and they got D&D Beyond as part of the deal.
Wow. So yeah,
Basically,
so we're all thinking this is the main thing, and it's sort of
yeah,
almost an
yeah,
afterthought for
and
everybody
then
involved, right? I mean, from beginning to end, Wizards included. It's sort of an
oh yeah,
afterthought. Like
and
that's
and
nice.
and then we kept doubling and doubling, doubling, and we got to the point to where we were half of Fandom's business, and they were like, "Oh, like what do we do with this?" And it got to
That
the point
sounds
to where,
familiar.
yeah, and it got to the point to where Wizards couldn't ignore it either.
Right.
They were like, there's a lot of money here, and as a licensed partner, there's obviously rev share going on there, right? And they were like, we're giving up too much money here, so
Right.
let's do a deal. Let's bring them in house, and honestly, that's the right thing for the product. Like that's where it should live. It should live alongside with the team that's actually creating D&D. Crawford, Perkins, that whole team. That's where it should be. You know, so I'm glad to see that finally happened. It was not easy to get there. I will say that. Um, but it was a fun journey. Like it was a fun journey. I personally, I have some regrets in that journey because of all those acquisitions. We had so many start and stops. Because every time a new company would come in, they would have their own take. They would be like, "Oh, you're about to launch these features. We don't know if that's right. Let's stop. Let's reevaluate. Let's maybe do something different here." Um, there were a lot of features that we had built over those years that were in production but feature flagged off to only just like us admins that
Hmm.
players never got to see
Yeah.
because of that.
Yeah.
And that's painful. Like that hurts me because I know there was a lot of benefit that we could have provided users over the years, and just but because of those kind of organizational changes, that kind of stuff happens, and
Right.
that's
Right.
that was
But it
painful.
did happen though. It's a glorious, beautiful thing. So wait, so I got that. How did it get to Wizards? Where was like what was the transition to that then?
Yeah, uh so
But at
I
this
got
point, right, everybody's surprised. So
oh
you said they can't
yeah
ignore it,
yeah
right? Okay. So
yeah
then,
yeah so we've been bought by Fandom. We're continuing to
right,
grow, and we get into late 21, and we've got several features built. And like part of the process that we had with Wizards is like they had to approve everything that we did
right,
on the site,
right,
like book releases, like did you actually represent the content of the book correctly? Any new features, like is it you, like is it like representing the game well,
right.
kind of thing. Totally understandable, totally
Sure,
agree with
sure.
that. Um and then, like, out of the blue, they just got to where they were just blocking a lot of stuff,
Okay.
and which doesn't feel great for an engineering team,
Yeah, yeah,
because it's
yeah.
like we've put all this time and effort into doing this, and like this isn't like you've never treated us this way. So
Right.
like, what's
Like
going
something
on?
changed, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and we were all pretty sure something was going on, like at that point. Like, like we've already been through two acquisitions in 4 years at this point. We can read the tea leaves.
Right.
Um, so so sure enough, like June of 22, I get read in, me and my VP of product, um, as to what's going on, and so we had to go through due diligence and all that kind of stuff and transition activities, and then they wound up doing signing off on the acquisition May May of 22. I think it was May 18th or May 19th. Anyway, May of 22. So that's when we transitioned into Wizards, and it was just D&D Beyond and the teams that were working on it, right? So it was just like that part of Fandom. It wasn't all of Fandom. Like
Right.
Fandom
Which makes
kept
sense. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
wiki and all that kind of stuff. And it was fun. Like I remember, like just a few weeks after the acquisition, I'm sitting in a conference room across the table from Crawford and Perkins talking about the new rules that are coming out for basically the expansion of fifth edition. Like we were talking about it back then,
Right.
and just like, oh, I geeked out so much. It's just like
Now, did you get lifted and shifted your team move
yeah,
over, or
yeah,
so they were just like, we're just obviously the product and the support team, the
yep,
team that developed it, everybody comes over to
yep,
Wizards.
yep. Basically rebadged.
And was
Like
there an expansion? Was the feeling like just keep it up, just make the magic keep grinding along, or was I mean you said they start
basically keep it up because like they were still trying to figure out internally like what the overall direction was, and there were some leadership changes also when we were coming into the company. Like Cynthia was relatively new there
right,
in the CEO position, and then she brought in Dan, to kind of like be the GM for D&D. So he was trying to figure out what he wanted the org to look like, and the product offering overall. So there was some like, hey, let's just see how things are going to kind of shake out, kind of situation. So the team didn't really grow or shrink in that regards. Um, and we were already pretty healthy at that point. Like when our later days at Fandom, we had grown up to about 65, at that point. We shrank back down a little bit from that because we utilized some nearshore contractors to kind of like staff augment
Mhm.
for some of the things that we were trying to get built inside a timeline. Um, but it was still a really healthy team, and we had a lot of engineers dispersed through the U.S. We were fully remote at that point. We also had teams in Poznan, Poland, as well.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Now, so here you are, you're in this sort of situation where obviously it's almost like you grew something and the prize chicken is too big to ignore. You're like, at this point, everybody has to acknowledge that this is a success.
Yeah.
It finally goes to Wizards, which again, one would say, okay, well, yeah, why not? Obviously, that's D and
Right.
D. So, what's always fascinating with this was what was the original? Was the vision of this just to be like, you know what, D and D be so much better if it was just digital? Or was the idea to play it wireless, no paper at all? Was the idea like what was, and I'm curious about that evolution, right? So
Hmm.
from
Hmm.
because you've seen it from the beginning to
Yep.
its
Yep.
arrival at Wizards. I imagine maybe people either came around to her perspective or the perspective changed as like, you know, you brought up several factors. I've written about this before in N World. It's a perfect storm, right? You have the pandemic came later, but
Yep.
you've got a game system that embraces a bigger tent. Frankly, it's not just sort
Right.
of we're trying to do, and I never begrudge Wizards for fourth edition, but a lot of people do. It sort of was much more listening to the user base. It was play tested publicly. There was a different conversation.
Right.
So that's a piece. You've got the rise of streaming, which is absolutely a piece.
Right.
And you've got sort of this understanding that, and it's almost like the MP3 market, you know, it's a new player to a concept no one could have conceived of when it was first out, right? So Dungeons and
Hmm.
Dragons is this
Hmm.
digital
Hmm.
entity. No one would have thought of it, right? So now you're
Right.
like, wait, this is an imagination tool. Why wouldn't you use, digital tools? But and it's clear, and I've written about this too, that Wizards really struggled with and TSR
Oh yeah.
with
Oh yeah.
figuring out what to do, right? How to engage.
Yeah.
Everybody certainly got the idea that like something electronically needed to be done. Ryan Dancy has talked about that, how they were basically pitching like if they could make MMORPG numbers, basically,
Yeah.
the World of
Yeah.
Warcraft's numbers, wouldn't that be amazing? And it sounds like in a lot of ways, that's not how it happened, right? So everybody saw the possibilities, but that's not, it was just almost like little engine that could by doing the yeoman's work of giving people what they needed. But I'm curious how it started, and by the by the time it gets to Wizards, what it ended up as.
Yeah. Um, so our original desire as the original team of 4 or 5 of us was to make the game easier to play. And and I still remember I've told my previous teams this story so many times they got sick of it. Um, but like I still remember there were a lot of late nights that first year, and we're in our little Cuba area, and we're crunching. It's like midnight, and Adam turns around to us and he was like, guys, like I appreciate y'all being here this late at night, but like like what's motivating? Like why are you sticking with this? Like why you got lives, you got families, like why are you doing this? And I think he was trying to understand like why we were invested in the project. And and I turned around and told Adam, I was like, my motivation is that uh I want people to be able to live that story for as long as they can. I want them to be able to stay in that character
Mhm.
because, especially with modern life, it's really, really hard to get 3, 4, 5, 8 people together for several hours a weekend, several hours a month. Like it's just life is hard that way. And it's really, really hard to get everybody together. So the longer I can help people stay in that character and have that ability to, and this may sound a little bad, but escape their real life, you know, then
Sure.
then I have succeeded. Because I remember the days of the 80s and the 90s where we've got stacks of books on the table and I'm like, crap, I want to, like, how do I grapple? Jeez, let me get out the PHP. Where's grapple? Page 137. Like, so I'm
And
sitting
if it
here
was
trying to.
a D&D, you didn't even know which page, or they were
Yeah,
like, I was
yeah,
like,
yeah,
well, let me go into the wilderness survival guide for the, heat rules, and the Dungeon Master's Guide page, something in the back appendix for the other rules. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right. And the problem I've always had with that is it breaks immersion not only for me but for the entire table.
Right.
And like the DM, they can deal with that, but I don't want the other players to have to deal with that. So
Yeah.
that was always our driving vision. And yeah, multiple acquisitions may have gotten in the way of that periodically, but that was always our driving vision, was keep the players immersed in their character. How do we make it easy enough to where they don't have to worry about that? They don't have to go flip books. They don't have to break immersion for the entire table to do that. They get to be that character for that 3, 4, 5 precious hours that they get once a month, instead of 2 hours out of the
Right.
five. So that was always our driving goal for that. Maybe we did great in some areas, maybe we didn't in others. Like, that's always debatable, and I'm always happy to have that conversation with people. Like, there's a lot of things that went on behind the curtains,
Right.
so to speak. I myself would have liked to have seen us uh, have been a lot further along than where we ended at. But that was our original goal and our original intent.
That's interesting because, I think there's a lot of people who would be like, you know what, if I never had to look at a book again, I'd be great.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and now, and I've seen this a lot on Reddit, there are people who go, I don't understand this. And you go, wait a minute. That's on page 37. And they go, oh, I actually never looked at a player's handbook. I just use the SRD, or
right,
whatever
right.
to fill
Yep,
in the blanks.
yep,
And sometimes there's context they lose, right? You're like, oh, by the way, there's like a diagram of a thing that you
yeah,
completely whiffed because you didn't see the rules. Like layout matters, in some cases.
right,
There's other things
right.
that books bring to the table that this is floating data. But conversely, I run an online game. My
Hmm.
players,
Hmm.
hello, they know who I am. And we have, and to your point, like we're not playing for weeks because of, I just told you before we started, like 8 different things going on every
Right,
weekend.
right.
But I use, we play on Roll20, so I use
Hmm. Hmm.
Roll20,
Hmm.
and I am constantly checking things in real time.
Yeah,
And I've trained an AI using my own database to answer my questions too. So I actually have an assistant in
yep,
addition to the text.
yep.
And I can't imagine it without it at this point. And it's not that D&D's gotten more complex necessarily, but I think to your point, our tolerance for, someone to go, and I also think too, there's probably a shift in the internet has done this to us, right? We always say like, my kids don't know what a world without Wikipedia is like. They don't know what a
Hmm.
world without
Hmm.
YouTube is like. So, and then
iPhones,
there's my
iPads,
parents,
like,
right? And there's my parents who I was like, you have a machine that you just put a question in and words come out. Never ask anyone ever again a question before doing that. Just go in there and just see what Google said. Just
right,
try,
right.
but the older generations were like, even when there was an example I was reading recently. They were like, there was a book on how to use Google, and you know, okay, I guess I see that as a generational choice because it's not that you look, if you need the book, that's why you're not using Google because you need the
Right,
book, right? But
right,
it's
right.
just the fact that, and my other thing was the number one search term in Google is Google. So people go to Google and So I think it's a
Uh,
top 10. It's not number one.
yeah.
But
Have you ever seen the College Humor? If Google was a guy,
oh yes, yes.
those are
I
so
have.
amazing. Anybody on the stream, anybody watches this in the future, if you've not seen those, go find them. They are amazing, absolutely amazing. Um, but that's a great segue into like something I started to realize over the course of working on that project that I didn't realize at the very outset is every subsequent generation is more digitally inclined than the next.
Hmm.
And a great example of that is I've got 6 kids, and their ages range from 30 to 12. And the digital, like how they engage with digital content from the 30-year-old to the 12-year-old are vastly different,
Hmm.
vastly. And that's just a matter of 18 years,
Yeah.
and my expectation is the day of print is is going to come to a close at some point. Not entirely. Um, I think that a lot of publishers will still publish books, but they will be like, um, like collector items.
Sure. Yeah. Like records are vinyl records and cassette
Right.
tapes are coming back. I just found out yesterday that cassette tapes are coming back for some reason.
What?
Taylor
What?
Swift released, yeah, she released a cassette tape and it's selling like crazy and it's like the number one selling cassette.
Oh,
And so,
geez.
yes, that's right. Yep. Hmm. Yeah.
I don't know if I still have my cassette player. I may have to
It's
go buy one.
probably worth $1 million now.
Not for
So,
Taylor Swift, but yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
So, all the girls would appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so every subsequent generation is going to expect digital consumption
Right.
more so than the next. So, I think that that is a key item for the evolution of the RPG industry. And we're just not entirely there yet. And like taking a print book and turning it into a PDF isn't the answer. Like it's just not. Like they're going to want a more rich, immersive experience than that, and that's what they're going to expect. And yeah, that comes at a cost. It comes at a price. I don't think the industry is geared for that yet, outside of the 800-pound gorilla in the room.
Right.
But I think that that's something that we're going to have to adapt to and grow to, um, to like continue to keep people engaged and continue to grow the industry.
And it's funny because we're sort of bringing this full circle. I started mentioning how we're digitizing old newsletters.
Hmm.
And here we are talking about the
Hmm.
death of, not the death of print. I don't want to freak anybody out. We're not saying the death of print, but probably the gentle transition away from print is
Yeah,
probably a better way to put it.
yeah,
But
yeah.
you're a CAR-PGA board member. So, we had talked about some exciting things. Do you have any thoughts about using your experience, certainly, but not limited to that? What you'd like to see for the CAR-PGA? Again, the CAR-PGA has been around, since the 80s.
Yep,
So
yep, yep.
it's one of the few organizations that has had to flex just like the game has,
Right, right.
in sort of and gone through different leaders and myself included. But I'm curious as the newest board member, what your thoughts are, and this is your chance to sort of speak to the membership. So let's hear it.
So the expertise that I can bring to the table as a board member is my experience on helping digitize a role-playing game at scale. Um, for D&D Beyond, we would routinely hit 150,000 concurrents on the site and the app, millions of users per month. Um, so I understand like what it takes to kind of take that paper rule set and turn it into a digital experience. Uh, Obviously, there were gaps there. Yeah, we know, and I can tell you what every single one of them are, um, because all the players were sure to tell us that. Uh, but like I also had um the benefit of talking to Jeremy and Chris after we became a part of Wizards, and understanding like what that needs to look like going forward in the future from a content creation perspective into a digital consumption perspective. They're
Hmm.
not there yet. Wizards isn't there yet. It's going to take them years to get there. They will probably get there before most others just because of their size and their money and their pocketbooks. Um, but I do think that that is the eventual future for how we consume and play role playing games. And it's not a video game. It's like digital assistants. Like I don't have to buy a book. I don't have to lug around books in my backpack, to my local game. Um, and we're not doing great with it yet. Like I wouldn't even consider D&D Beyond great, having started it and worked on it. Like
Hmm.
it's not, like we can do much, much better. Um, but I do think that's where we're headed. It'll take us a while to get there, but what I would like to see for for this group is because of the reach we have to industry experts and academics is how do we help the industry evolve and set standards for like digital consumption, right? Because a lot of the companies, they will do their own things. um Wizards is gonna feel like they can just do whatever they want to, just because of their size. But I think if we could help the industry set standards around what should digital consumption look like and provide a consistent experience for everybody, then it's only going to help grow the entire industry. So that's something that I'm thinking about as a board member for this team is what does that future look like? And it's not next year. It's probably not even 3 years from now. It could be 5 or 10. Like this particular industry still moves a little slow because it's so rooted in like physical book publishing.
Right.
So it'll take a while to get there. But I think for us to continue to engage younger and younger and younger generations, that's where we're going to have to get to, you know.
Absolutely. It's funny you mentioned this. So I've run the game design merit badge for Boy Scouts. I've done it
Hmm.
twice.
Hmm. Yep.
The first time against my better judgment thought it was too many scouts. I couldn't run it the way I wanted to run it. So I got them a
Mm,
bunch of those
mm.
big foam dice and I made
Yep.
them as a
Yep.
group. It's like 20 scouts, right? As a group, I put a projection on the screen and had them fight a monster by having all of them roll in turn.
Right.
And
Right.
they didn't like it. I got feedback later. They were like, so I got because we're just about done with scouts. My son's becoming an eagle. He's just about done.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, but this literally yesterday, I had the chance to do Dungeons and Dragons again. Game design merit badge. You can pick a game. So I picked a game. We
Hmm.
picked the whole session. My son, who is grown up since 4 years old with role playing games, was ready to be DM. I was a DM. We had another kid who was a DM, and then we just sort of had these other probably 15 younger scouts. So this was a younger group.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And what we ended up doing was a very tactical, very hands-on. I tried to project on the screen like how the game works,
Mm, hmm.
which was about a 50-50 success rate. But mostly we just did it. We just played, and it was so fascinating to me that that was the best way to do it. Right? It
Yeah.
wasn't telling. It was just getting them to play and start rolling dice,
Right.
and then explaining through trial and error what a hit is. Because these kids are brand new to this, right?
Yeah.
Although some of
Yeah.
them immediately picked it up way faster than I've seen adults do, which was hilarious. But it was really, to your point, it's a complicated concept, right? Dungeons and
Yeah.
Dragons, I always say there's nothing like someone giving you an encyclopedia or dictionary sized book and go, this is how you play this game. By the
Hmm.
way, you're probably going to play it for a year. By the way, I hope you can find other people because you're going to need them. You're like, this is the worst Monopoly game ever. Like, when does it end? What do you mean? 3 to 6 months of gaming?
Yeah.
That's like a friggin' job. Who's going to
Yeah.
pay me to do, it's really quite the thing. It's almost a lifestyle, frankly, which for me
Right.
it is.
Right.
So it's amazing it took us this long to go. You know what's really turning people off? The rules. Can we make it electronic? Can we make it basically frictionless? Right? They don't have to go away. They don't have to not exist. They don't. But can I not have it where I have to go flip through a page to find it?
Well,
So
and like when when your group tells you when like they're trying to like get you into like the group and join the game and stuff like that, and they're like, "Hey, we're gonna meet up at Steve's house on Saturday for session 0, and we're gonna spend 8 hours building your character."
what?
Like that is a huge barrier to entry.
Yeah,
Like that is like, would I still find that fun? Yeah, okay.
yeah,
But like my kids, no.
yeah.
Mm-mm. No,
Totally.
like they're not going to deal with that. Like
Right.
they're just not.
It was
So
anyway, I could go on and on about that. That's like a whole nother session. But so I know, and I think you're right though. I mean, just to add my 2 cents to this, CAR-PGA needs to be a leader in the space.
yep,
We have tremendous bench, yourself
right,
included.
right.
That's a compliment, but yourself included. And we have tremendous opportunity, right? We have not really exercised it. I mean, that's if you read that note that Paul Carwell wrote to Gamma,
Hmm.
he
Hmm.
essentially was like, dude, we've been around the block more than you
Yeah,
realize,
yeah, yeah,
and he's right. And that continues to this day. We have tremendous bench strength. I think it's how we exercise it. We tried during COVID and it was tough. It was
yeah,
tough,
yeah.
partially because COVID was sucked and politically
Tough.
it was
Yeah,
fraught, frankly.
yeah.
But we were talking about like, how do you play in person? What's the rule? What's guidelines?
Right, right.
And even when we cited every single thing, we still got people pushing back and like, how dare you? So
Yeah.
I think this is probably a little bit of a different stakes, but I think it's absolutely one that's the future. Um, and that it goes, everything from to your point, the formatting, how you do it, where it is, it frankly probably encompasses things like AI,
Yep.
PDFs. I mean, I never
Yep.
forget Wizards banned PDFs for like a few years. And there's like, it's hard to imagine actually saying that out loud that they were like, don't use this format,
Well,
you know,
and like standards for like visually impaired. Like
right.
I can't I can't count the number of DMs I got on the site from users that were like, this is the first time I've been able to play D&D for 20 years because I lost my sight, and like, Wizards never published really anything in Braille or never really helped or engaged that part of the community. But now, since you've done this digitally, I can use a screen reader.
Right.
Granted, we were still trying
Absolutely.
to improve that experience, but like, it was there and it was available for the first time for in a long time for
Yeah.
people, and like those are some of the things that we can do digitally. And then like specifically for this group, like the publishers are really going to kind of take care of the play space. Like that's how they make money.
Hmm.
But like we've all seen a ton of literature, and there's probably a lot of members in this group that have done research on how playing RPGs are beneficial outside of just that pure entertainment space.
Hmm.
And I think that that is an area where we can also provide a lot of benefit to the industry in providing standards. Is like, if if we want to provide settings and games in a institutional reform setting, or uh gosh, like a special needs setting, like what should those look like so that we have a consistent experience, a high quality experience, for the people playing the game, and then also the people that are trying to run the game, so that
Right.
they're not like on their own, like trying to figure this out.
Right.
And I think there's a ton of knowledge here, there's a ton of talent here, and I think that we can really try to like provide a lot of experience and guidance in those areas. And yeah, digital transformation is a part of that, and I can try to help lean into that. But there's a ton of other areas here where we can really, I think, make an impact as a group.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we've talked about it. We've tried sort of different conversations. We've certainly done letter writing campaigns around to some of the justice systems in the states where they,
Yeah,
started
yeah,
blocking D&D books and just all kinds of stuff. But
right.
there's way, way more opportunity. All right. Well, we could go on for hours. Um, but so what's going on for you? What can we find you somewhere with your latest content? What you want to do? Is there anything you'd like to share in terms of,
This is a problem with me being Gen X. I'm not very like social media.
like, don't talk to me. I'm
Um,
good.
yeah, like
Latchkey kids are like, you know what? I just know how to give me cereal and a cartoon. I'm good. So
yeah. I think I'm still on Twitter or X or whatever it's called. Heartless D20. I'm actually still on D&D Beyond. Like Facebook, any other kind of mediums, Steam,
mostly
like
as Heartless D20. Is that where you're?
Heartless D20. That's
Yeah.
pretty much
Hmm.
my handle across any platform.
Got it.
So,
Excellent. Anything else that you'd like to share
uh,
that we didn't cover?
like I'm excited about the possibility for the future for role-playing games. I think they have started to migrate away from a lot of the negative stigmata that we had, like late 70s, early 80s, like, oh, it's just for nerds, oh, it's, the whole satanic panic kind of thing. Like I think we finally gotten to the point of realizing like the benefit of sitting down and having and running these kind of games and the social interactions that they provide, and the benefits that they provide. So I think we're actually at the point of seeing these become a major benefit in society. And what I'm hoping is that we can help like provide guidance for that.
I think that's right. I mean, one of the things that I think CAR-PGA is definitely challenged with is to find a voice amidst so many other
Hmm.
voices, right?
Hmm.
So we've
Yeah.
spent a lot of time getting these voices just to come together,
Right. Right.
and get critical mass again, right? Because that's the thing.
Yeah.
The CAR-PGA membership shrank a lot. We are actually over 60 now.
Mm.
And it's not, it's not 60 just people, it's 60 people, many of who are industry professionals themselves in variety of spaces, not just
Yep.
gaming space,
Yep.
therapy space,
Right. Right.
business space, academic institutions. So I think there's definitely a huge, huge opportunity here. Um, but it's right place, right time. In a lot of ways, to bring it back to what you talked about with the D&D Beyond, it wasn't just the platform, but the platform was a huge piece of that. It was definitely the fifth edition being
Hmm.
friendly
Hmm.
and people considering it again. It was definitely
Yep.
streaming,
Yep. Yep.
unveiling why you
Yep.
would spend 8 hours at session zero
Right.
for a game and then say we should play for 6 to 8 months, 4 hours every week.
Yeah.
It's like the worst Monopoly game ever. I just can't imagine it in other. It's so funny because I hate Monopoly. I really hate it. But because nobody ever finishes. And I always laugh because I was like, Monopoly, if it goes too long, you hate the game.
Oh
Whereas in
yeah.
D&D,
Oh
like that
yeah.
wasn't long enough. I had only, to try and
Yep.
play a D&D game for like an hour. You're like, I just started. So yeah, there's a huge opportunity there. But I think you're right. I so appreciate. First of all, I'm thrilled that you joined us as a board member. I think that was fantastic. And by the way, kudos to Ted Skirvin, who stepped down and, was happy to sort of be like, I think it's time for other folks to come in. So I really appreciate him doing that. But
Yep.
more to the
Yep.
point, this is the kind of, I always say turnover is healthy for all of
Hmm.
us in the board.
Hmm.
Me
Hmm.
too. Everybody's not listening to me. You don't have to
Yep.
vote for me in the future if you don't want
Hey,
to.
everybody, we're always going to keep Mike in this position, just so y'all
Damn
know.
it. Um, but yeah, you don't get to get. This is like scouts. I was like, I'm done with scouts. They're like, you don't really get fired from scouts. You just sort of never leave, just for the record. But if you do the work, congratulations.
Yep.
It's volunteerism. But thank you, Heartless. Yeah, I'm gonna start calling you Heartless now.
Yep.
But
There you go.
no, I think there's huge opportunity. So I think it's great. I so appreciate you joining us. I so appreciate we. I mean, look, you should write a. You should absolutely write just like one article about your vision, because I think that would help others engage. So we'd love to hear more from you.
Yep. Yep.
We're certainly going to
I
have
do
another
owe
board
y'all
meeting.
that. I do
Yes.
owe y'all that. So
So more to come from
yep.
you. But
Yep.
what
Yep.
we'll do is we'll put this in the newsletter for this month. Although everybody be gentle with me because I got to turn this around in between a lot of things going on before the end of the month, which
I'm sorry, Mike.
is
I'm sorry.
we got like a week. We're all right. I'm sure I can get done.
With a
Um,
holiday weekend.
yeah,
Yeah.
with the holiday weekend and Eagle Court of Honor and hiking the Appalachian,
Oh,
it's fine. It's
oh,
fine.
that's fine.
But I bring that on myself too. It's like I can't complain. But yeah. So I think we're gonna have plenty of more to share. But thank you again, Dave. I really appreciate you
Yeah.
taking
Yeah.
the time. And
Yeah.
like I said, we could easily talk for another 2 hours. So don't go
Oh
anywhere.
yeah.
We'll stop the recording. We will have this up on YouTube. We'll make sure I get your socials, which I was looking you up, and there's like a lot of Dave Hartlesses actually. So
There, which is quite surprising. Like I was surprised about that myself.
you're
Like,
like, oh
because
no,
like sometimes you just Google yourself, and
right? Yeah, yeah,
I'm like, wait,
yeah,
how many other Dave Hartleses?
yeah.
Like, that's not a common
There's
name.
at
Like,
least six. It looks like so.
yeah, yeah,
They're all over the place. But yeah, so and we'll get all that out and then we will absolutely keep the conversation going. But the best part about this is I don't have to pitch that you to be a member and you're a board member.
yep,
So we
yep,
absolutely will hear more from you.
yep,
Thank
yep,
you
yep,
for coming
yep,
on.
yep,
I appreciate it.
absolutely. Yep. Thanks, Mike.